What makes Benjamin Franklin so unique among American founders, nay, Americans in general? Hi, I'm Jason, and this is Founder of the Day. Today we're going to talk about Benjamin Franklin. Now, I've only been making videos about 2 weeks, so there's probably only about 20 people watching this, so thank you for watching. I'm going to try and give you what you want. So far, what most people seem to want is me talking about things, not only just what I like and about founders, but why I like them. And Ben Franklin is a great place to start. So I'm going to reflect on an article I wrote about a year and a half ago, one of my earlier articles on founderoftheday.com, which was 5 strange facts about Benjamin Franklin. And today I'm going to elaborate not only on those facts, but I'll give you a few bonus facts. Some of these you might know, and others you might not. So let's get started. The first one is he ran away from home. Now, some of us know this, but he wasn't just a teenage runaway. He actually came from, I don't want to say wealth, but a middle-class family. His older brother owned a printing press, one of the only printing presses in the entire colonies. Because of this, he was very fortunate to have learned about printing, but at about the age of 17, Ben Franklin didn't like working for his older brother and ran away, which was a serious crime, even for a minor back in the day. So he was really fortunate that he was able to become a success and not get captured and brought back to work for his brother. Because working for your family, you were just below an indentured servant when you were a child. Moving on, he was a vegetarian, and this came about mostly because when he was a runaway in Philadelphia, he was really, really broke. So how did he save money? He only wanted to do was buy books, and he didn't have a lot of money. So what he did is he stopped eating meat. He wasn't a vegetarian because for any modern reason. He was a vegetarian because books were expensive and meat was expensive, just like today meat's pretty expensive, and he had to make a choice, and his choice was books. So he decided to become a vegetarian, and he stuck with that for the rest of his life. He just got in the habit and stayed with it. Now, sticking on the being broke fact in his life, Franklin actually found several ways to make money before he got operating his printing press and became wealthy and famous, and one of these ways was giving swimming lessons. At some point as a child, he learned how to swim, and back then a lot of people didn't know how to swim. It was kind of rare to know how, so he would be, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, teaching people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s how to swim, mostly for fun. But in fashion, it was a life-saving. People would fall in rivers and just kind of drown because they didn't know what to do, which I know not everyone can swim today, but a lot more of us are a lot more secure in the water than they were back then. So, moving on later in life, several decades later, but sticking on the idea of water, Benjamin Franklin invented a musical instrument. It was called the glass harmonica. And I know it sounds like harmonica, but it's absolutely nothing like it. It's kind of like a piano. If you've ever seen someone put up a bunch of wine glasses and wet their finger and spin it around the wine glass and play little tunes like that, that was the premise, except they were glass mechanisms that spun like a bike wheel. So the glass itself spun. Instead of spinning your finger, the glass spun, and you would just wet your finger and put it on the glass. And believe it or not, even Mozart and Beethoven, who were alive at this time, wrote songs for Benjamin Franklin's glass harmonica. Because, and this is not really one of the facts, but Ben Franklin was wildly famous for the day. And not even just for a colonist, for anyone in the world. He was, in his, not even later years, from his 40s and 50s, for the rest of his life, and he lived to almost 90, he was one of the most famous people on Earth. And one of the facts I wanted to expand on is that his celebrity was so unbelievable. First of all, when growing up in the colonies, he wrote Poor Richard's Almanac for about 25 years. He started writing Poor Richard's Almanac, which was his famous almanac that really made him a trustworthy figure in what was then popular culture. He became the first pop culture icon. He wrote Poor Richard's Almanac. He franchised printing presses throughout the colonies. So he was one of the only people who was printing in all the colonies. And he started Poor Richard's Almanac about the same time that George Washington was born. So George Washington grew up and became a man and started reading Poor Richard's Almanac as a teenager. And John Adams grew up and became a man and started reading Poor Richard's Almanac as a teenager. Thomas Jefferson grew up and didn't really read Poor Richard's Almanac because although he published it for about 25 years, Franklin had already finished that run by the time Jefferson and Madison and Hamilton were old enough to read. But because of the celebrity he had before they grew up, they grew up knowing who Ben Franklin was. There wasn't a time where you had celebrities that you knew, especially someone from a different colony. You might as well be from Asia, because people did not really care what was happening in other colonies. They would read up on world news. The wealthy people in particular would read newspapers about what was going on around the world. But they didn't really care because it didn't affect their lives. Except for Ben Franklin, who almost single-handedly gave Americans, as opposed to New Yorkers and Virginians and South Carolinians, he almost single-handedly gave Americans one common cultural aspect. It was Ben Franklin. And then that celebrity carried overseas, because by the time he had spent a lot of time in London, but he hadn't spent much time in France. But by the time he went to France during the American Revolution to treat with the French, he had already put up the lightning rod on people's rooftops, which at the time, a lot of people thought if your church got struck by lightning, because the church was the tallest building in every town, your church got struck by lightning, it was because God was mad at you and you had done something wrong. Ben Franklin put lightning rods up there and became known as the man who tamed God. I don't want to sound blasphemous, but that is how they referenced him. At the same time, he famously, by the time he showed up at France, he already had his image painted on plates and cups and paintings on people's walls. It was one of the first times in the history of the world that someone arrived in a major city that they had never really spent time in before, and everyone already knew what he looked like. There were no cameras. There was no interweb. It was just hand painted. And that is one of the bonus fact we'll say for this video, is that what makes Benjamin Franklin so unique among Americans is before there was celebrity, he was a world famous celebrity. Now, I'll mention the last fact and then I'll let you go, which is Benjamin Franklin was famous for his science. We all know the famous lightning in a key story that is kind of true, but not really. He didn't go out in a storm holding it up. He knew how dangerous lightning was. But he did, for example, give us the word electron. And he also corresponded tremendously with other scientists around the world, but mostly in the United States and in London. And there's one Londoner named Joseph Priestley, who was not an American founder. He was British and always stayed in Britain. But their correspondence helped develop things like chemistry and understanding the Gulf Stream and how hurricanes work and how they come up the coast and how, it's the same storm and just hundreds of different scientific experiments that they either ran together or separately and shared their information with each other. The reason I'm bringing up Joseph Priestley is in a letter in 1772, Benjamin Franklin wrote to Joseph Priestley, and he wrote a pros and cons list. It is so commonplace today. It's just a natural trope that happens in every sitcom you watch, and you do it yourself even if you don't want to, and people recommend it. Would make a pros and cons list. It sounds ridiculous, but the first example in written history, in English at least, of a pros and cons list was written by Benjamin Franklin. So I'm going to let you go. Before I do, I'm going to throw you a recommendation. This book is called The Invention of Air. It's actually a biography on Joseph Priestley, who I just mentioned. With Founder of the Day, I'll never have another chance to recommend it, but it is an amazing book, not only if you like history and history in the late 17th, early 18th, late 18th, early 19th centuries, but if you like science and the history of science. This is an amazing book. I'm going to put an affiliate link below, which just means you go to Amazon and buy it, and they send me back a little bit for recommending it, but it doesn't change your price. Don't worry. I can't recommend that book enough. It's an amazing read. Now, there are still thousands of things about Franklin I've left out. A coonskin cap that he wore in France to make himself look more like a country bumpkin, and his not-so-great family life. I mean, it was kind of fine, but he was kind of mean to his kids, but that was after his first kid died, and he became distant. There's a lot I left out, so do me a favor. In the comments below, what is your favorite thing about Benjamin Franklin? What is the strangest thing about Benjamin Franklin that you can't help but love? Again, my name is Jason. Thank you so much, and we'll see you tomorrow.